Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Spyderco Polestar, a relatively new release out of Spyderco, kind of toward the lower end of their budget line. Let's do a little size comparison here real quick. First off, we have the Ontario Rat number 1, Ontario Rat number 2. Right here we have the Spyderco Delica, Spyderco PM2, right there. And so we can see that size-wise, in terms of overall amount of shop and blade, you're right in PM2 sort of territory, which is frankly nice. What else do I need to compare this guy to? Well, actually, why not? He is a Z Hunter, just so you know. Alrighty, so there you go. Next thing about this guy is that this is a Chinese-made Spyderco. This is apparently made in a different factory than, say, Tenacious, according to some Spyderco forum posts, but it's still made in China. I want to thank my buddy Nathan for sending this guy along. He's Nasty Nate Outdoors on the YouTube. Feel free to check him out. And this is also just worth noting a Sal Glasser design here. You can see the maker's mark here, and as Sal described it on the forums, it is the Spyderco Bird Lineup Raven 2 that's minus the finger choil. So there you go. That's kind of what this guy's got going for it. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular knife. Okay, so on the good side, first off, the steel on this guy is CTS BD1. The Tenacious, Ambitious, that whole lineup, this is an Ambitious that had a bad run-in with a sharpener, but nonetheless, they are all using 8CR13 MOV. This is a different steel. BD1 is an American-made steel, which is kind of nice, I guess. It's very similar in terms of overall performance, maybe a little bit better. It's a fine steel. It's not super impressive, but it works. It'll do the trick. Takes a very sharp edge and, doesn't keep it forever, but whatever. So that's the steel. It's okay. Next thing, the G10 on this guy is interesting. The Tenacious et al. I don't need doing that comparison over and over again because it's kind of begging for that comparison. Rather than being just a black vanilla G10, has this sort of an effect here. I'll see if I can show it off. From pictures, it looks like it's kind of a uniformly colored thing where they kind of cut little grooves into it, but practically speaking, there's a little texturing, but it's relatively smooth, and instead what you've got here is sort of a flannel overlay on top of raw G10, which is interesting, or I'm sorry, well, sort of the natural color of G10 underneath there. It means that this pattern isn't going to be persisting throughout the scale, but it's fine. It's interesting. It kind of looks like denim a little bit. It's a nice change from black G10 that they have everywhere else in the lineup. So there you go. Next thing, this does have damn near a sharpening choil. I mean, if you look at it, there is a little cut out there, which allows you to sharpen towards the end of the blade. It's only damn near because it doesn't quite make it to the end of the plunge grind here. You can see there's still a little bit of a beard, and it still doesn't, but it's closer, and I love to see Spyderco moving towards sharpening choils, because that is a beautiful thing when you've got one. So there you go. The lockup on this guy is very secure. It sounds kind of nice. Yeah, nice. No problems whatsoever. Fit and finish on this guy are actually pretty good. It's not an, oh my God, $300 knife, but you know what? It's okay. And I feel like the fit and finish on this guy is on the whole a little bit better than your Tenacious Ambitious family. Just there are some nice little details there. For instance, the jimping is very different. These are made by different factories, and you can kind of tell that. The jimping on this guy is a lot more nice than this very kind of harsh, hardcore jimping. The fit and finish matching the scales to things is just, it's nicer overall. This is much more nicely made than the Tenacious, Ambitious, Persistence little family there. So that's nice. And then the blade shape on this guy is very nice. The reason I say that is because, well, not only is this nicely sharpened, this is from my buddy, but he hadn't done much cutting with it, so it came very, very sharp, and I gotta say, it is very thin behind the edge, which I like very much. I mean, you can see there at the choil, there is not a whole lot of thickness to this blade to start with, and when you've got a blade that's relatively thin, you can see it's only slightly thicker than the Delica, but it's much wider. This is a very nice slicing tool. So I like that so much. A knife that can cut things is always a beautiful thing in my mind. So to me, that's the good here. It's got a very nice blade shape that's meant to actually cut things. The fit and finish are fine. It's got nice enough lockup. It's got something that's getting really close to a sharpening choil there. It's got G10. It's a little different than the norm, and the steel on it is an American steel, which is okay. Let's talk about what's great here. So on the great side, this is a very smart design, and this shows in a bunch of different ways. I mean, ergonomically, this is a Sal Glessa knife, of course, and ergonomically, it's built like a Sal Glessa knife. It's great in the hand, and you've got a lot of little details here. You got a thumb ramp with some jimping right here. You've got this little guy which serves as a finger guard, effectively, to keep your finger from sliding up onto the blade without the use of a finger choil or something like that. It is very nicely designed for the hand. You also see some nice interior facts. You see, for instance, the skeletonization of the liners. There were little drilled out holes in there that we were able to see in the disassembly, which helped to reduce the weight a little bit, making this not a terribly, terribly heavy knife. We can see here, it's just around 4 ounces as I recall. You also have a pivot that is very similar to the Spyderco PM2, where there's a, one side's D-shaped, one side circular, and the washer is held captive by the pivot against the liner there. It's a nice design, and it works very well here as well. One of the things that really kind of impressed me the most about this, and it's on bronze washers, by the way, beautiful thing. But one of the most impressive little design elements here is actually the positioning of the Spidey hole. Because if you have a Spidey hole that's intersects with the plunge grind, then you end up with sort of a little jump-up ridge on top of your Spidey hole, and that can really be a little bit unpleasant against the thumb. With this guy, it comes right up to the edge of the plunge grind, but it never quite hits it. And as a result, you have a perfectly smooth and frankly very well chamfered edge on this blade. The entire knife is very nicely chamfered, by the way. Like, all of these surfaces are very smooth and just beautifully done in that way. So, that's a beautiful little design touch, but it's something that shows that Sal here has put a great deal of thought into how to design that. And so, for me, that's the great thing here, is this is a very well thought out knife, even at a lower end price point. I like that very much. Let's talk about the bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, with my particular hands, there is kind of a hollow here with the lock bar cut out, which leaves my middle finger feeling like there's not a lot to grab onto. It's still fine ergonomically, but and I imagine it'd be easier if you had bigger hands, so things were spread out a little more. But for me, that's kind of an ergonomic failing. Not a big deal, though. Next non-big deal is that it's not using your standard Spyderco clip. This is using one that's more like what you find on the Tenacious, etc. The only reason I'm giving it, it's a fine clip, and, practically speaking, as a clip, it's pretty much the same, but I do like standardization. I would kind of prefer that they were using the same clip as on the Delica, the PM2, just so that aftermarket deep carry clips work just fine on this guy. Whatever. Not a huge deal. One thing I will say, though, is that having the lanyard hole inside the clip helps to prevent nasty growths for lanyard tubes, like you get on the PM2, or even worse on the Para 3. So, there you go. Next thing. The lock bar on this guy is not terribly, terribly comfortable to use, in that there's very little chamfering kind of against the side of this. I would like this to be a little bit more sloped. It really feels like you're pressing your finger into a relatively high lock bar tension, 90-degree surface. It's not the end of the world, and certainly, you're going to have good purchase on it, but it doesn't bring me a whole lot of joy. And I can definitely see why they need this nice, big lock bar sort of cut out there to get at that without being really painful. So, there you go. Next thing, the G10 here, you can see that it is just a lamination of this flannel G10 on top of the raw G10. And it's a little bit kind of weird. You see this guy in a catalog and you think, oh, cool, it's going to be a bluish deep color, and then you turn it over and it's like, oh, that was just on the surface level. I can kind of understand. I'm sure it's much more expensive to buy a solid sheet of this sort of an affair. But it leaves me feeling a little bit cold on that. The other thing is that I'm already seeing a little bit of evidence here of these layers peeling apart around the pivot here. This little white area underneath, I believe, is where this flannel layer is separated away from the raw G10. It's not the end of the world, but I don't know. I kind of wish that were throughout the thing so it had a more consistent experience. It feels a little bit underdone, but whatever. And then finally, on the bad side is the price. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this knife is a huge ripoff or anything, but this is a $60 knife, and that's right up there with some of Spyderco's better stuff, like your Spyderco Delica. And so that's a higher price point than, for instance, your Tenacious and things like that. I had hoped that this would come in right around the same price as the Tenacious, maybe a little bit better, but this is a $20 jump above that, and so that's a little bit on the strange side. Like I said, they're not ripping your face off here. I can pretty much see it, but it's not coming in as a great value. Let's put it that way. So that's the bad to me, is that the price on this is not great value, even though it's not terrible either. The lamination on the G10 thing feels a little bit off to me. The lock bar on it is kind of on the sharp side. The clip is not a standard Spyderco clip, and there is, for me at least with my hands, a bit of a hollow here with the lock bar cut out. Let's talk about what's ugly. So on the ugly side, two things. First off, on the disassembly, you saw that there was a great deal of thread locker. Now, it wasn't a permanent thread locker, so that's okay, but they just used way too much of it, and it bled into the pivot of the knife. It got all under the washers. The washer was stuck to the inside of the... It was nasty. So they just used way too much of it. That's an ugly thing, but that's something that's just a problem with one worker at the factory. I'm not going to hold it against them. It's just a place to train. The uglier thing is the detent on this knife. Unfortunately, this just doesn't have a very strong detent. I mean, it won't come flying open because the blade is pretty lightweight, and I can most of the time get it to flick open without any wrist. But I found myself on a number of occasions, particularly before I did the clean out, completely failing, doing a partial pop open on this guy. And I love a good detent even on a thumb opener knife, and there we go. This doesn't have it. I found myself just instinctively giving this guy a bunch of wrist, and even still, it's not always secure that it's going to lock up. I'm kind of hoping that that's just kind of a one-off issue with this particular knife, and that may be why the lock bar is so strong on this one, to try and make up for the lack of detent, but that's ugly to me. I hope that the rest of them are better, because if they're like this one, that's a problem. But there you go. So the ugly is the lack of detent, and the fact that they really drowned this guy in thread locker, and it had a negative effect on the functioning of the knife. Let's talk conclusions. So this is a fine design and a very nice knife. I mean, it's smartly done. It feels quality, much more so than Tenacious and whatnot, and it has Sal Glesser as a designer, which is just a beautiful thing. But the thing is, it's also not immediately obvious what this design is bringing to the table that some of the other ones don't. This is basically a Spyderco Tenacious wearing designer jeans. It's got a fancy G10 pattern, although it's only fancy looking from one angle. It's got a slightly nicer American steel, and, it's got better fit and finish and whatnot, but you're also paying $20 more for that price, for that, improvement there. So only you're really going to know whether that's a great choice and whether that's a worthwhile improvement. And when you jump up that $20, you're in the same price range as the Delica, which to me feels a little bit more refined, a little bit more masterful. So I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be the best choice. And so rather than being a brand new technical envelope, it's not pushing the line in any particular way in terms of knife making. And it's certainly not pushing the line in terms of value. At $60, this is okay. $50, it'd be a little more inspiring. And at $40, replacing the Tenacious, oh my God, yes. But as it is, it's okay. Well, I kind of come to determine that this is an options knife. This is a knife that doesn't do a whole lot, but it does give you another choice. It gives you something else to pick from in that area in the 40 to 60 range. Because maybe you don't like the size of the Delica, maybe you like the look of the Polestar better. In that case, this is a fine choice. It's a knife you could pick up. Maybe you like the look of the Tenacious or the Raven, but you want something that's a little bit better done, that's a little bit better in fit and finish, and maybe wearing a fancy pair of jeans, in which case your Polestar is there. And so that's kind of where I land on the Polestar, is that it's an option. It's a solid knife. It does a good job at cutting things, absolutely, no doubt, and you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay with it. But at the same time, it doesn't jump out. It doesn't distinguish itself. And honestly, I don't know that this is going to be the star of any particular show. So there you go. Solid entry, but not really jumping to the front of the pack or to the back either. Okay, hope this was interesting to you, that it provided a guiding star in your purchasing decisions, but mostly I hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day, and that you found this review appalling. It could be appealing or appalling, so it works either way. Bye now.